This woman's hair, as if granted life of its own, recklessly burrows into her boyfriend's throat. No matter how hard the two of them struggle to pull apart, they cannot separate. Right after that, all the flesh on their bodies begins to stick together, gradually merging into one inseparable whole. As a couple's hearts grow further and further apart, their bodies are forced closer and closer together. Is this ultimately a curse or a blessing? The film opens with a scene of a hiker searching all over the mountains and forest for his two beloved dogs. But he doesn't know that the two little dogs, thirsty, have found a pond hidden deep in the forest and are drinking their fill. Before long, the owner finds the two dogs. But for some reason they seem sluggish, showing no reaction even to his familiar whistle. Reluctantly, he takes them home. That night, the doghouse suddenly makes strange noises. The owner rushes over to look, shining his flashlight into the darkness of the doghouse, and discovers the two dogs have fused together, forming one inseparable mass. The scene shifts to the two main characters, Tim and Millie. They've been in love for years, but their relationship seems to be standing on the brink of falling apart. Millie has always tried to save the relationship. She convinces Tim to move, hoping a change of environment will help them start a new life. At their farewell party, in front of friends and family, Millie suddenly proposes to Tim. Unexpectedly, Tim freezes on the spot, unable to speak, making the atmosphere extremely awkward. He eventually manages to respond and agrees, but once the right moment has been missed, nothing comes from complete, genuine willingness anymore. That night, the more Tim thinks about it, the guiltier he feels toward Millie, so he apologizes to her once again. But unexpectedly, Millie suddenly suggests breaking up. In truth, she too is full of confusion and anxiety, unsure whether they're still in love. Tim hastily apologizes and expresses his feelings, and Millie agrees to set aside the idea of breaking up for now. That night, they're haunted by nightmares until they wake with a start. To save their crumbling relationship, they quickly give up their friends and jobs, moving to a remote countryside area to start a life with just the two of them. While unpacking, Tim smells something very strange and discovers the foul odor is coming from the ceiling. He removes the ceiling light fixture and from a hole the size of a palm pulls out several dead rats. No wonder the smell was so overpowering. Still, neither of them pays much attention to this minor incident. After all, they've just moved to an entirely new place, and there's still a lot to adjust to. Millie is an outstanding young woman, always radiant and shining. She quickly finds a new job at a local school, while Tim is a music producer who lives off inspiration. On Thursday, he has to go back to the city for a concert, but since he doesn't have a driver's license, he needs Millie to drive him to the train station. Before leaving, Tim plans to go hiking with Millie to a spot they'd once planned to visit, but they haven't gone far before finding the road blocked. Not wanting to waste the trip, Tim decides to take an unfamiliar trail instead. Along the way, they see many bronze bells hanging from the trees, as if someone had deliberately left them as trail markers. The two of them figure that if there are markers, they surely won't get lost, so they venture onto the path. But not long after entering, they do get lost. The weather turns against them too. A heavy rain suddenly pours down, and their phones lose signal. Right at that moment, Tim carelessly misses his footing and falls into a hidden deep pit. Millie panics and rushes to pull him out, but as a result, both of them tumble into the pit. Tim's phone goes missing somewhere in the fall. His demo recordings are still on that phone, which worries him. Hearing this, Millie is at a loss for words. In a situation like this, all he cares about is his phone, not even asking whether she's hurt. Tim, realizing his mistake, quickly apologizes. The two of them soon notice that the stone pit they've fallen into is actually quite spacious. Even their raised voices echo back to them. Seeing this, they decide to venture further inside to take shelter from the rain. It turns out this is the very place where the two dogs once drank water. Millie sees the pond in the distance and feels thirsty, but luckily they still have some water left. Tim gives all the remaining water to Millie, while he himself plans to crawl over to the pond to quench his own thirst. He figures that in survival shows, everyone drinks natural water like this, so it probably isn't too serious. The rain shows no sign of stopping, so the two of them build a fire to keep warm and chat to pass the time. Unable to contain her curiosity, Millie asks Tim how he came to discover the dead rats. Tim recounts that when he was a child, his father suddenly said he smelled something very strange in the house and began tearing through everything to find the source of the odor. He even pulled up the floorboards to check. Tim, at the time, was scared to death, since he himself couldn't smell anything and didn't understand why his father was so upset. The next day, after school, Tim came home to find his father standing in his bedroom, looking as though he'd just discovered something. It turned out he had finally found the cause. A rat had built a nest inside the heat lamp fixture. When Tim turned on his bedroom light, the heat from the lamp had roasted the rat to death right inside the ceiling. Even after the dead rat was removed from the room, Tim remained deeply haunted by it ever since. He couldn't believe that for such a long time, every night, he had been breathing in the smell of the rotting rat carcass without ever realizing it. As an adult, that same horrifying stench of death returned once more. This time, Tim discovered his father's body in the bedroom, and on the other side of the room sat his mother, who had gone insane, staring at him with an eerie smile. Just as Tim had failed to notice the smell of the dead rat all those years ago, his mother hadn't noticed that her husband had died either. She had continued sleeping beside his corpse every night, as if nothing had happened. This is the first time Tim has ever told Millie this haunting old story. His mother's horrifying smile and that thick stench of death have become the deepest nightmare buried in his heart. That night, the two of them sleep in the stone pit. Suddenly, Tim is woken by a strange sound. A suffocating feeling makes it hard for him to breathe. He feels as though something is moving in rhythm with his breath, as if the entire cave were slowly coming alive. Millie, lying beside him, also begins to sob. The next instant, Tim jolts awake from the nightmare. The damp air inside the stone pit leaves his whole body feeling uneasy. In any case, the rain has stopped, so the two of them decide to leave. But they're stunned to discover that their calves are stuck fast together. Tim thinks it might be from mold that grew overnight. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he tries to pry apart the terrifying sticky bond. Afterward, they grab onto vines and bit by bit, crawl out of the stone pit, eventually finding their way back home. After showering, Millie feels aching all over and asks Tim to massage her shoulders. Seeing his girlfriend's bare back, Tim suddenly feels dizzy, as if losing control. Still, he forces himself to endure it and continues massaging her, but the dizziness only grows worse. Seeing Tim's face turn pale, Millie panics too. She tells him to shower and rest while she drives down to town to buy some groceries. Millie drives along the winding mountain road, unaware that back at home, Tim is behaving as if remote-controlled, his body swaying with every movement of the car. It's as though the two of them are bound by some strange connection. Every time Millie hits the gas, Tim nearly slams his head into the wall, almost cracking the tiles. Panicked, he gradually regains awareness, and the more he thinks about it, the more abnormal it seems. So Tim decides to see a psychiatrist. Since his mother also suffered from mental illness, he worries he might be affected by genetics. The psychiatrist initially diagnoses Tim with signs of anxiety. Without early intervention, the condition could progress into a somatic panic disorder, a type of illness that can slow down the activity of the central nervous system. The doctor prescribes Tim some medication and also mentions a piece of news related to the town Tim has just moved to, a place where a married couple once went missing under strange circumstances. Tim returns home and immediately searches for information related to the case. He discovers that police once conducted a large-scale search, but were never able to find the couple's bodies. Tim goes on to access the social media account of the wife, named Kelly, and finds she once posted many photos of the two of them together, affectionate couple photos. Right then, Millie comes over and suggests that if Tim isn't feeling well, he shouldn't force himself to go perform tomorrow. Tim is about to answer when he suddenly notices the documents open on the computer screen. It turns out Millie hadn't known that people had gone missing in this town either. The silence is suddenly broken by a knock at the door. It's Jamie, Millie's colleague and neighbor. The couple warmly invites Jamie in. They tell him about getting lost in the cave yesterday. Taking the opportunity, Tim asks Jamie if he knows what the bronze bells hanging in the forest are and why someone would place them there. Jamie explains that the forest used to have a small chapel, but it collapsed years ago. However, it wasn't a traditional church, just a gathering place for a group of New Age hippies that looked more like a cult. Tim notices that Jamie has been showing particular attentiveness toward Millie throughout the visit, and jealousy begins to stir in him. Right after seeing Jamie off, Tim immediately tries to get close to Millie. But the moment their lips touch, something horrifying happens. Their lips seem glued together, and pulling apart causes excruciating pain. Millie, furious, thinks Tim deliberately bit her and storms off to her room in anger to rest. Late that night, they suddenly feel a strange pulling sensation on their scalps. Millie assumes Tim is lying on her hair again and turns to scold him, but when she turns around, she's horrified to find Tim staring at her with wide-open eyes. Millie's hair, as if possessed by a maddened spirit, is burrowing straight into Tim's throat, choking him. The two of them struggle desperately before finally managing to tear the strands loose and escape the bizarre ordeal. The next morning, Tim deliberately avoids bringing up what happened the night before. He's always been sensitive about his mother's situation, afraid that if he tells Millie, she'll think he's going insane like his mother too. Millie understands but feels helpless and drives Tim to the train station as originally planned. However, as the distance between them grows, Tim begins struggling to breathe again. He hurriedly takes the medication the doctor prescribed. By the time the train pulls into the station, Tim has no mind left for performing at all. He abandons his guitar without a second thought and immediately turns back to run home, his face growing paler by the second. At the same time, Millie has just finished her first class of the day. She notices a girl named Anna sitting in the classroom drawing, but the content of the drawing makes her shudder. It depicts two dogs with their heads fused together, utterly grotesque. Right after that, she receives a call from a close friend. This friend seems to sense that Millie isn't actually enjoying country life the way she'd imagined, but has instead been drawn into a stressful relationship with Tim. She advises Millie to reconsider her relationship. Before she can respond, Millie spots Tim standing in the schoolyard, his face pale, looking utterly exhausted. Alarmed, she rushes down and pulls him into the teacher's restroom, asking what on earth has happened. But instead of answering, Tim's eyes are filled with desperate longing, and he immediately tries to get close to her. In this absurd, distressing situation, the two of them suddenly become stuck together again, making every movement dangerous since they could be discovered at any moment. Millie quickly covers Tim's mouth with her hand to muffle any sound, then grits her teeth through the pain and forcefully pulls the two of them apart. Right after, someone hears the commotion and comes over to ask Millie if everything's okay. She steadies her breathing, flushes the toilet to cover the noise, and steps outside with a composed expression. Outside, Jamie is standing with a young boy. It seems the boy wanted to use the men's restroom but found it occupied, so he went to get a teacher to help. Jamie turns and glances back, catching a glimpse of a man still inside the restroom. Back home, Millie erupts in anger. What Tim did today could get her fired, and if things got serious enough, could even bring a police investigation. She's exhausted from constantly cleaning up after Tim's messes, and no longer wants to keep sacrificing herself for his vague musical dreams. Millie calms herself down and goes to find Jamie to apologize, hoping he won't report the incident to the school. Jamie invites her in. Millie, weighed down with pent-up frustration and nowhere to release it, tells Jamie that she and Tim had a huge fight. And ever since moving here, the two of them have been constantly on edge. Jamie, a history teacher, shares with Millie a piece of Platonic philosophy. He tells her that the ancient Greeks believed humans were originally born with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 1 head with 2 faces, but because the gods feared humanity's power, Zeus split them in 2. Ever since, each person has spent their whole life searching for their other half. Jamie tells Millie that if she believes she's found her other half, she shouldn't let go so easily. He admits that he once had a deep relationship of his own but failed to cherish it, always looking for ways to escape it in pursuit of freedom. He invites Millie to watch an old video of his wedding, but Millie suddenly spots Tim's shadow lurking outside the window and makes an excuse to leave. Still, Jamie's heartfelt words help calm Millie's spirit somewhat. She returns home more composed, takes Tim's hand, and heads back with him. At midnight, Tim still can't fall asleep. He opens the social media account of Kelly, the missing victim, searching for the locations where she once posted hiking photos. He's suddenly stunned to find that the coordinates of a place Kelly once visited are exactly the same forest where he and Millie got lost. Tim zooms in on the photo to look more closely and indeed discovers a bell hanging behind the couple in the picture, marked with a special symbol. At that exact moment, his computer suddenly loses its internet connection. A loud noise sounds behind him, causing Tim to fall backward onto the floor in panic. Looking through the frosted glass, he sees a human face pressed right up against the door, rubbing up and down repeatedly, sending chills down his spine. Sensing it might be Millie, Tim hesitates before moving to open the door. But right at that moment, an inexplicable violent force seems to seize him, causing him to lose control and kick hard against the door. The moment he opens it, Millie immediately lunges forward and clings tightly to him. With so many bizarre things happening lately, the two of them are forced to sit down and have a serious talk. Tim explains that the missing couple had also once walked the same trail leading to the cave, and he suspects the recent strange occurrences all trace back to that place. According to him, every night, once their minds begin to relax, their bodies lose control and are automatically drawn together, as if controlled by some invisible force. Hearing this, Millie thinks Tim is talking nonsense. How could there be such supernatural things in this world? Not wanting to argue further, she turns to go back to her room, but the moment she reaches the door, her nose suddenly starts bleeding. Tim seems to understand something at that moment. "Do you know why you stopped?" "Because the instant I stepped toward you, you wanted me to stop. I could feel it." Though unwilling to admit it, Millie too begins to sense that things are spiraling out of control. Still, stubborn as ever, she forces Tim to sleep on the couch. But in the middle of the night, Tim loses control again and starts drifting toward the main bedroom. He has to cling desperately to the wall to keep himself from moving further. But right then, Millie opens the door and crawls toward him in a twisted, unnatural posture, looking every bit like a monster. Her body bends and warps like soft clay, and no matter how hard the two of them resist, their bodies keep being drawn together by some irresistible compulsion. Within moments, their hands have fused, flesh merging into one. Tim shouts in panic, "There are muscle relaxants in the drawer!" Millie frantically yanks the drawer open, uses her teeth to twist off the bottle cap, and the two of them grab the pills that scatter across the floor and shove them into their mouths. The medication begins to take effect, numbing both their bodies. Using what strength they have left, Tim and Millie brace their feet against each other and try to pull their fused arms apart. They're almost successful when they suddenly pass out from the overwhelming effect of the drug. The next morning, Tim wakes to find himself tied tightly to a chair by Millie. Beside him sits an electric drill. A large patch of skin on their arms is still fused together. Millie pours a bit of whiskey for Tim to dull the pain, then explains that the muscle relaxant hasn't fully worn off yet. This is their only chance to separate. If they miss it, the pain will only be worse later. Millie proves to be remarkably tough. She picks up the drill and bores straight into the fused patch of flesh between them. After gut-wrenching screams of agony, they're finally separated, but the remaining medication is nearly gone. Millie decides to go to the hospital for a checkup, but realizes she's left her car keys at Jamie's place. She heads over immediately to retrieve them. Meanwhile, Tim quickly digs through their belongings and pulls out climbing gear, preparing to head back into the strange cave. At the same time, Millie rings Jamie's doorbell without any warning. If she'd paid closer attention, she would have noticed the doorbell has a sun-shaped design identical to the symbol carved in the cave. She steps inside to find the house completely silent, with no sign of Jamie anywhere. On the television screen, a video is playing, footage of the front of an old church, where a small bell identical to the others hangs. At the same time, Tim reaches the bottom of the cave. He discovers ancient murals still preserved on the rock walls, remnants of the old church, depicting a humanoid creature with 4 arms, 4 legs, and a single head with 2 faces, exactly as Jamie had described in the legend. On the other side, Millie sees that very same image in the video playing on the screen. In the footage, Jamie is having a wedding ceremony with his lover. The two of them open a door leading down to an underground chamber, guided by members of the cult. They gather around a sacred pool of water and allow the couple to hold their wedding ceremony under the witness of the stream, blessing the two of them to become each other's other half, merged into one. Right after, Jamie turns off the video, appearing with a serious expression, holding the car keys. He congratulates Millie on receiving the God's blessing, that from now on she can share her fears, memories, even her very body with the one she loves. With that, Jamie takes Millie's hand and uses his wedding ring to carve a deep cut into her arm. Millie cries out in pain, yanks her hand free and runs. At the same time, Tim is dragged by an unseen hand into another part of the cave, where a grotesque creature with 4 arms and 4 legs appears, its hair a fiery red. It's a sign that this may be the missing couple, Kelly and her husband, who, after unknowingly drinking from the spring, fused into this horrifying creature, forever trapped within the cave. The 2-headed monster closes in, and Tim is scared half to death. He happens to notice a dagger lodged in its neck and quickly pulls it free to use as a weapon. Tim slashes off the creature's arm, breaks free from its grip, then grabs onto a vine and escapes the cave. He collapses onto the ground outside, gasping for breath for a while before finally dragging himself home. The moment he arrives, he runs into Millie. The two of them share everything they've just been through, but something terrifying happens once again. They can no longer control their bodies, being drawn together against their will. Knowing this cannot go on, they cling to nearby objects to try to keep their distance. But it's clear this state of affairs can't continue for long. Tim lets go, reaching behind him to grab the dagger. Perhaps there's only one way left to solve this. He steps in front of Millie, kneels down on one knee, and sincerely apologizes for all the pain he's caused her over the years. He tells her that in his obsessive pursuit of his musical dreams, he forgot about the woman who had always stood by his side. Looking back now, Tim realizes Millie is more precious than any dream. Just as he finishes speaking and is about to end his own life, he suddenly notices a trail of blood running down his arm. Following the trail, he's horrified to discover Millie badly wounded, collapsing from severe blood loss. Facing this dire situation, Tim has no choice left. He lets their arms fuse together and quickly works to stop the bleeding, saving Millie. After everything they've been through, the two of them finally realize they cannot live without each other. If that's the case, then what is there left to fear? Tim puts on their favorite song, takes Millie's hand, now permanently joined to his, and the two of them dance together to the music. They accept their fate, letting themselves merge completely, becoming one inseparable whole. On Sunday, Millie's parents come to visit. The film ends here. Today's story ends here. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.